Hello everyone. I'm Sumisha Rana. I'm here to have an open heart conversation with my guest for the evening, along with my co host Aman. I'm excited to introduce my guest. She is the president of the International Association for Buddhist Women, founding director of the Alliance of Non Himalayan Nuns, honorary advisor to the International Network for the Engaged Buddhists, and founding member of the Committee for Bhikshuni Ordination. It is my greatest pleasure and honor to welcome Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo to have this open heart conversation. Thank you for your valuable time and blessing us with this opportunity.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you. It sounds much more impressive than it actually is. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much. As a woman who works in a very heavily male dominated technology sales industry, I connected very well with your journey from getting ordained as a Buddhist nun to becoming Jetsunma, which in Tibetan translates to master and teacher. In a religious setup which has mostly male monks who are revered all over the world, from Thich Nhat Hanh to Dalai Lama. I want to ask you, how did you break the glass ceiling and create the way for women to follow this path?
Well, I wasn't really trying to break any ceilings, either glass or plaster. I just carried on doing what I wanted. I mean, in the beginning, when I was living with in a society which was mostly monks, I must admit it was very difficult, because you didn't fit in anywhere. I mean, just as a monk would not fit in a community mostly of nuns. But later, after I had been living for many, many years in Lahore, then the monks, the lamas of our community asked that I should start a nunnery. And so then from there on, they also gave me tremendous latitude. They said, you can do whatever you want, you can do it how you want it to be. And so I just tried to think of how, if I was a young nun starting out, how would I like to be trained? How that I wasn't trained. And so then we took it from there, really. And because the nunnery has come up and is successful and the nuns are very well trained now, the monks admire that. And so of themselves, they begin to appreciate the feminine, the feminine. Nuns can do everything the monks can do, and often better. And they began to recognize their abilities and got on board with it. They really love the nuns. They really admire them and encourage them. So it hasn't all been struggle. I mean, actually, the monks have been extremely helpful with training the nuns and encouraging them and teaching them, and in every way being very, very helpful. So I have gratitude, actually, to the male monastic establishment. Once they got the idea that nuns could do these things, and so then they have been very cooperative on the whole. And it's like the Berlin Wall, you keep hitting against it, think it's never going to break down, but then suddenly it collapses.
Yeah.
So then, now really for nuns also, the sky's the limit. They can do what they want. Yeah. Not just me. I mean, many people have been. This is the time for the emergence of the feminine, I think, not just, Tenzin Palmo, against the world. It just naturally flows at this time everywhere. So this is for the women. I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that, in his opinion, the future of the Dharma is in the hands of the women. And His Holiness Karmapa, when he came here, likewise said the same thing, that, he said to the nuns, the Dharma is yours now. You're the ones who are going to carry it forward. So even these great lamas recognize that things are changing, and there's getting more balance. It's not that we want to overcome the monks or, rule the world, but, that imbalance of power is slowly beginning to change. And so this is a good thing because everybody benefits. It's not that the nuns are going to take over from the monks, but that, like brothers and sisters, they can uphold the Dharma together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I really want to say that I'm really inspired by the work you have done to establish the nunnery and, creating to where it is now, right, in Himachal Pradesh. And you work so relentlessly in gathering funds by teaching, in schools all over the world. I just want to understand, where do you get the inspiration to do such remarkable work? What is your motivation?
Well, many, many, many years ago, my root guru, Kampa Rinpoche, said to me on a number of occasions, I would like you to start a nunnery. And at that point, I had nothing, I mean, I had no money, I had how do you start a nunnery? I'd never even lived in one. And so then I just let that go. And then many years later, in the early 90s, then the lamas of our monastery said, look, we would like you to start a nunnery because there's nothing for the women. And at that point, I recognized, yes, that's what I need to do, because it's true. If I don't do it, nobody else is going to. So we started very simply, and everything flowed together. It was the right time. And people were beginning to recognize, oh, there are nuns. So many people said, oh, for 20 years, I've been supporting the monasteries. Nobody ever mentioned nuns. And now everybody mentions nuns. Just yesterday, we saw a very nice it wasn't a documentary, it was a film about nuns in Mustang in Nepal, and very charming. And so nuns now are everywhere. Everybody knows about them, but years and years ago, they didn't. And so in the last 20 years, really, there has been an enormous growth in not only the interest taken in females, not just nuns, women in general, but also their own confidence that they can achieve anything if they wish to, that the potential is there, and also the means is there now, that nobody says anymore, no, we don't teach this to women. They wouldn't dare. And so, now everything has changed very much. Many of the best teachers are women. Many of the best selling authors of Buddhist books are women, and so forth. So in a very short time, things have changed a lot, really a lot. And everybody benefits. There's no loss. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to ask you, what's been the most touching and remarkable moment of your life? Could you share that with us?
Oh, I thought about that question. And I think probably the most, apart from reading a book on Buddhism when I was 18, which of course changed my life radically, the most momentous occasion was the meeting of my root guru, Kampa Rinpoche, when I was on my 21st birthday, actually. And just, I had known just hearing his name that he was going to be my guru. And so I had no idea what he was like, whether he was big, short, thin, fat, how old he was. I had no idea at all. I just knew that this was going to be my Lama. And so when I first met him, as I say, he turned up where we were working at the Young Lama's homeschool in Dalhousie in Himachal. And I was so nervous. I just stared at his brown shoes. I couldn't even look at him. And then, anyway, someone on my behalf asked if I could take refuge with him. And he said, yes, of course. He said, of course. And then I looked at him for the first time, and it was as if I was meeting someone I hadn't seen for a very long time, like, oh, how wonderful to see you again. And at the same time, as if the most innermost part of my being had suddenly taken a material form in front of me. It was such an intimate relationship, which I've never experienced with anyone else ever. And I mean, basically, here I still am. I mean, we are now, he died when he was 48 years old, but his incarnation came immediately. and is now in our monastery, which is close to the nunnery monastery. He's now 40 years old, and we're still very associated with the monastery. And yeah, I've been with that community ever since, really. So that was the most, what changed my life completely was just meeting with him.
Sure. And, I also want to discuss with something that we are all witnessing all over the world, right? So you open the newspaper or watch the news, and it's really shocking with what's happening with us. We are all in the middle of a pandemic, and people have lost their jobs, and businesses have been shut, and people have also lost their lives. And everyone I know is stressed, complaining, blaming, and unable to cope up with all the stress. So, as per you, what are the remedies and methods that some of us can, use to help endure this hardship?
Well, of course, I mean, for many people, it really is extremely heartbreaking, and there's no doubt about it, especially those who've lost their jobs and or have, been affected by the actual disease itself. So, one doesn't want to murmur platitudes because it is really a very, very serious situation for many, many people. But, one thing is that, the Buddha did say that this round of birth and death, samsara, is not a joyride, that it is really a very difficult situation which we find ourselves in. Because but it's impermanent, and so also this terrible time will pass. Things change, and change isn't always bad. Change can be for the good. And meantime, to recognize that the real problem is not just what's happening out there, but what is really happening, how we respond to what is happening out there, really. And that we make difficulties more difficult by an unskillful response. If we get upset, angry, worried, troubled, despairing, and depressed, then that adds to the problem which is already out there for us to face. So therefore, it's very helpful if we look at methods for helping us to deal with the situation inwardly, even if we're not always able to deal with it outwardly. I mean, the certain circumstances we cannot change, but we can change our own inner attitude towards that. So there are many different methods for that. One, of course, is to learn how to make the mind somewhat more calm, more quiet, to become one with the breath, breathing in, breathing out, just to quieten the mind so that we can begin to see the situation with more clarity than we normally would do if we get all agitated and upset and worried. The other point is that we can recognize that when we have difficulties, we can also, either we get very introverted into our difficulties and get caught up in our own self-concern, or we can use that to recognize how many other people are suffering likewise or even worse, and develop in that way empathy and compassion for others. I mean, that we're not in this alone. Right now, the suffering itself interconnects us because it's all around the world. It's not just poor people or people in undeveloped countries. It's everybody, everywhere. I mean, in the most affluent countries, as well as the more indigenous, everybody's suffering at this time. And to recognize our interconnection with each other and to be careful. Indians are very naughty. They're not being very careful. They're not wearing masks. They're not doing social distancing. They're just running around all over the place. Himachal is filled with tourists at this point, mostly from the Punjab. And so the cases of COVID are skyrocketing, whereas before we were very careful in Himachal and really being, protective. Now it's just gone crazy. People are not very careful, not caring about others, and their social responsibilities. But to recognize that, this is the way things are, and to develop this empathy for other beings, that everybody is suffering here. and to develop loving kindness towards beings, and to not be so caught up always just in our own problems, but to take all the difficulties onto the path instead of seeing them as obstacles. These are opportunities to become more centered, more courageous, more empathetic, and so forth. You know, especially anyone who is on any kind of path which they regard as being spiritual, have to take the difficulties which they encounter as the path, not just when things are good, but especially when things are very, very difficult. And also not to give in to a lot of fear and paranoia and so forth, which just pollutes the atmosphere and makes it worse. But to give out lots of light and love, and you know, genuinely to do what you can also to help others. You know, there are so many people out there now trying to feed the homeless, trying to deal with all different kinds of social issues which come up. So rather than just being trapped in our own paranoia, to use that to open up our heart to being more responsive to the needs of others. And because mostly you can always find people who are in even greater need than we are. So, you know, it's a hard time, but we can use it also. Many people are at home, they have nothing to do. Well, practice, read edifying books, do some meditation, do social outreach to encourage others and so forth. There's so many things you can do. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. And you know, while we talk about connection, and we are in an era where we are also digitally connected, right? We have so many social media platforms, and they use a lot of, you know, artificial intelligence, which gathers our data, you know, so they know all our likes, our dislikes, and they know the days that, you know, whatever we search, the days we don't feel good, the days we are feeling stressed and lonely, we are also virtually connected, you know, online, but yet, you know, most of us are not happy. So what's your view on that?
Well, I think people, one of the main problems is our present society is so distracted. I mean, people constantly, you know, they just sit there constantly on their you know, mobiles, and they're not just being and appreciating what's around them. They just are endlessly agitating themselves, either, you know, texting or else playing computer games and so forth. Our minds are so busy, but they're not busy in a beneficial way. They're just distracted busy. And so people get distressed. And, you know, people get, and also they feel alienated because, you know, I mean, this is just a cliche at this point, but I've seen it even here when we had, you know, students coming to visit. They would all sit around, instead of appreciating the beauty of the mountains or the trees or the flowers or the buildings, they would each one be caught up in their apparatus and not even talking to each other. And so people are on one hand so close, and yet at the same time they're so alienated. And plus, of course, with previously people, if they had enough to eat, enough to wear, you know, life was okay, then they were content, they were satisfied, life was all right. But nowadays, because of all the commercialism and the advertising and so forth, people are so desperately greedy, basically. You know, we've gone far beyond our needs into our greeds. And greed, like the Buddha said, is like salty water. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. And we see that all the time now. Every time there's something more, the next one, the better one, the newest one, better, new, better, new, until, you know, people are like on a treadmill, just running, getting nowhere. And so, of course, they're stressed. And they never stop to just be one with their breath. You know, 2 minutes during the day, breathing in, breathing out, just being present. People are not present anymore. They are caught up in the past or in the future, but what is actually happening in the moment, they've missed it. And so, yeah, people are stressed. And then you read, you know, they're endlessly caught up in all the, you know, news, which is always bad. And they, you know, as you said, on the internet, now there is so much out there. All the teachers are teaching and running courses and giving talks, and there's so much going on. We can, you know, we can connect with that, but why are we connecting with all the negative things which are put onto the internet and which just make people depressed and frustrated, or make them unrealistically desirous of things which, you know, they can't have, or if they do have, is not going to make them happy. This dissatisfaction is really very, very difficult for people. They never have enough. They never appreciate what they have because they're always thinking about what they don't have. Somebody said that we should imagine that we have lost everything. We have lost all our wealth. We have lost all our friends. We have lost all our family. Maybe we have even lost our faculties. You know, maybe we are just lying there, nothing. We've lost everything. And then suddenly we regain it again. Then we can appreciate what we have, how much we have. We have friends, we have family, we have enough. This ability to appreciate would be enormously beneficial, because we're always thinking about what we don't have, and we're not grateful for all that we do have. And to be grateful makes the heart content. If the heart is content, then we're happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something so profound and so true. I just want to ask you, you know, what's been the top three takeaways or life lessons you've had that, you know, you could probably share with us?
I personally feel the most important thing we can understand is that, you know, people imagine when they go, you know, to ashrams or temples or Dharma centers and so forth, that this is practicing Dharma. This is, you know, now I'm being spiritual. And they complain that, you know, well, I've got a family, I've got a profession, I've got this, I've got that. I have no time to practice. And I think the most important thing we can learn is that our daily life is our practice. That everyone we meet, everything we do, if we do it with the right attitude, then that is the practice. First of all, learning how to become, as we know, more mindful, more aware, more present, not endlessly in the past or into the future, but just now, right this moment, how are we in the body, knowing the mind? And then being kind, being polite, being friendly, being helpful. There are so many qualities needed. It's not just meditation. I mean, there are many, many qualities. And the most important thing we can learn is that everyone we meet is our helper on the path. If they're nice to us, then that's very nice, and we can easily generate kindness, generosity, friendliness. But especially the people who are difficult for us are the ones who really, really help us to develop qualities like patience and forbearance and compassion, which need difficult people in order to be able to practice. So therefore, our life, all the circumstances we meet with are teaching us if we are only open to learning. So I think that's the most important lesson we can learn, is to appreciate that our life is the practice. That's it. It's not just a matter of going on to retreats and so forth, but right here, right now, how am I dealing with what is in front of me at this moment. That's the important thing. And as I say, the second is gratitude. Gratitude and appreciation for what we have and the people that we have with us, rather than always dreaming of how if everything changed, then I would be okay. And not appreciating what we already have. For example, if we are not blind, then we can see. Well, isn't that fantastic that we can actually see? How would it be to be blind? How would it be to be deaf? How would it be to not be able to walk? And most of these things we just take for granted. We don't even think about, how incredible our mind is, how incredible so much that happens and is given to us through the labor of others. I mean, we just take it for granted, and then we think it's nothing. We don't understand how extraordinary all these things are and how interconnected again we are with everything coming together to just what we eat, what we wear, people who are doing so many different work to make our lives so much easier in this world. Why don't we appreciate that? So I think this is the point, that we don't have to go out there somewhere and think enlightenment up on the mountain. I mean, that's nonsense. Right here, right now, how are we dealing with our life? How are we dealing with the people that we know and we have to interconnect with? How are we dealing with the situation? Skillfully or unskillfully, with wisdom and compassion, or just stupidly creating more problems?
That's a beautiful answer, I must say, Jetsunma. And we have, some more questions that were asked by our audience. And Aman, if you could ask that to Jetsunma.
Hello, Jetsunma. Jetsunma, I have some questions from the CKSL Center and some from the audiences that we collected online. So the first question that Jetsunma I wanted to ask you was that when we read a lot of articles, we find meditation. There's lots of meditation app. There's mindfulness is the buzzword of the century, they say. But there's another keyword, there's another buzzword within the meditation circles, which is enlightenment. People discuss enlightenment all the time, like I'm going to get enlightened in this life. You're not even enlightenment. It's kind of become just another topic that people discuss, and we don't even know what it means. What does enlightenment means? Is it fireworks? Is it just, am I going to fly? What is enlightenment?
Enlightenment, at least in Buddhism, really means to drop the ego and to, our conceptual thinking mind. Okay, our conceptual thinking mind, the mind that goes blah, 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 yata, 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 day and night. That is run mostly by the sense of self, the sense of me, the I in the center of everything, around which the whole universe runs. That is a basic delusion. And as long as the ego is in charge, then there will always be also the greed and grasping, the anger when things don't go right, the pride that I have something special, or the envy when somebody gets something which I want. All of that is based on our basic ignorance, avidya, which is the belief in an I who is totally there, stable, unchanging, and in charge of everything. Now, essentially, all Buddhist meditation is to see through the delusion of the ego. The ego in itself doesn't really fundamentally exist, not in the way that we imagine it to be, as something stable and unchanging. And so if one searches for the ego, one can never find it. But in the meantime, who is searching for the ego is the ego. So we need to have, in the beginning, a well-balanced sense of self, a sense of self which is healthy. That healthy ego is going to walk the path towards non-ego and to recognizing the genuine nature of the mind, the primordial awareness, which is comprised of wisdom and compassion. That's our true nature. In Mahayana Buddhism, it's called our Buddha nature. It's what connects us with all beings rather than the ego, which separates us from all beings. There's me and there's you. And that is a fundamental delusion, which all genuine spiritual traditions understand, that what blocks us from the divine is this little self, which is all important and yet fundamentally it has never existed. So enlightenment is when the ego delusion totally dissolves forever. Often it can go for a very short time, but then as soon as we get into a state of recognizing the true nature of the mind, then the ego jumps in and wants to, own it and put a label on it and say, look at me, now I'm nearly enlightened. So it's very, when finally one is in this state of non-dual, pure awareness at all times, day and night, 24 hours, 7, then you could say you're enlightened. But honestly and truthfully, I have never yet met a Lama who said, I am enlightened. They all say, I'm just like you, I'm practicing, I'm on the path. Even His Holiness, anybody, I never heard anybody claim that they were enlightened. Capital E, shining lights, no. And I think that those who are closest to enlightenment are the most simple beings and the most open-hearted and compassionate and friendly and loving and, not in any way, look at me, I'm a very special enlightened being, I'm a Buddha. They don't, it's not like that. I mean, because there's less and less, not more and more.
Right.
So yes, I wouldn't worry about enlightenment. I would just not worry, but be concerned with developing, as His Holiness says, a good heart. Be nicer, be kinder. That's really already something. And be more skillful in responses so that we don't create more problems and things begin to resolve and become easier rather than more difficult. So like that, don't worry about enlightenment, just try to be a bit nicer. When your family say, you're getting a much nicer person, what are you doing? Then I think you're on the right path. Okay. As Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, go and spend a week with your family.
Jetsunma, so Buddha for sure got enlightened. I don't think there's any doubt in that. But when he comes from his retreat and he meets his friend, the first noble truth he discusses is suffering, that there's suffering. And there's 3 types of suffering that we discuss in the Tibetan Buddhist literature. But Jetsunma, what I wanted to ask you that what are all the deeper layers of suffering? So if somebody slaps me, yes, it hurts. That's suffering. But is there suffering in so if I'm aware of what is happening, is there suffering all around me? Is there dissatisfaction in literally every moment? Or is it just because I'm attached to objects, it's only then it's suffering? What is suffering and what are all these deeper layers of suffering, Jetsunma?
Oh, that's a huge question. The idea is that the Buddha said, what is the cause of suffering? The cause of suffering is our clinging, the clinging mind. And that the clinging mind is caused, of course, by our ego delusion, that the ego wants to have what it pleases itself and wants to push away what doesn't please itself. So this grasping, when everything is flowing, everything is moving moment to moment to moment, and yet we want to hold on to it, we want to be attached to it. And so that is what causes the suffering. In itself, samsara nirvana, it's not like if we enter nirvana, the world changes. It's still the same old world. But our attitude has changed completely. And we are not grasping, we are not clinging. And so therefore, everything is released. Let go, let go. And so it's not the thing in itself which causes the problem. It's our attitude towards the thing which causes the problem. And so, we suffer because we don't see things how they really are. We make everything very solid, very real, very self-existent from its own side, and we don't see that things are actually moving moment to moment to moment, and we ourselves are moving from moment to moment. In addition, the Buddha said that there are two kinds of suffering: physical suffering, mental suffering. And of course, physical suffering, somebody hits you, yes, you hurt, right? That's physical suffering. We can't help that. We have a human body. We get sick, we get hurt. That we can't change. But what we can change is the mental suffering, which is our attitude towards our physical suffering. Either we can get upset, we can resent it, we can get all full of, worries and self-pity, or we can accept. If we accept, then we don't have the mental suffering. We can use our physical suffering by, creating more compassion for all those others who are suffering as we are suffering, or recognizing that the suffering in itself is just, empty in its very nature, and so forth. I mean, there are many, many ways to deal with physical suffering. But the important thing is the mental. That we do have control over. If our minds are well tamed, then it doesn't suffer. When outwardly there is suffering, inwardly one is still at peace. So that was the whole point. I think it's very interesting that the Buddha, after his great enlightenment, after how many eons, kalpas of striving, finally he became a fully enlightened Buddha. And he didn't talk about love and light and bliss. He talked about dukkha. Because that's where we're at. We create so much dukkha for ourselves and for others, and we resist it, and we always imagine that if we get another news, something else, that somehow dukkha will be released. And we don't understand that the dukkha is not out there, the dukkha is in here. And that's where, fortunate, good news, because we cannot, as Shantideva said, we cannot carpet the whole world with leather in order to, not harm our feet. But if we wear sandals, then we can walk anywhere. So if we deal with our mind, then everything else transforms. So this is good news. The Buddha didn't just say suffering. He also said, what is the cause of suffering, which is the clinging, ignorant mind, and the fact that essentially there is a state beyond suffering, and here's the path. So like a good doctor, right? You're sick. This is the reason why you're sick, the cause of your sickness. However, fundamentally, you're healthy. Now, this is the remedy you need to take, and then you can become healthy again. So actually, it's a very optimistic. The Four Noble Truths are wonderfully practical and realistic, and showing the solution out of suffering. So thank you, Buddha.
Jetsunma, so I think this question would resonate with many people, especially those of us who are in Bangalore. So many of us who start this path, we go to Tushita, we go to Deer Park, we go to many centers, and we start our journey into Buddhism. And we are fascinated. We found our purpose, and we are very enthusiastic in the beginning. We found a goal, and we found a purpose, and we are very, very enthusiastic. But as time moves on, we realized that this might not be as easy as I thought. So we take on a good career, maybe we join an NGO, or we join a Dharma center, or we find maybe an interesting partner has come up, and we or maybe want to be a filmmaker. There is some reason or the other that we kind of lose the enthusiasm on the way. We kind of thought, this is not for me, maybe in some other lifetime. Let's just be kind. Let's just be, let's see what's going to happen. But they kind of give up. What advice would you have for those who stray Jetsunma, or who get distracted maybe?
Yeah, it's very, it's a very common problem. to keep that enthusiasm going constantly in the face of so many other distractions and so many other concerns which people have in their life. I think that, first of all, we shouldn't be too ambitious. If you've got a family, if you've got a profession, if you've got your social life, probably you will not become a fully enlightened Buddha this lifetime. But at the same time, there is a lot we can do to keep us walking on the path, not maybe, in a Ferrari. Maybe we're actually just walking or maybe cycling, but still traveling on the path. I would say one thing is to keep it simple. Not to be too ambitious, not to expect to do 2 hours, 4 hours of meditation every day, unless you really love meditation. 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Just basic shamatha, breathing in, breathing out, watching the mind. During the day, taking, as I said, 2 minutes, 5 minutes throughout the day, when there's a little time, just sitting quietly, being with the breath, being centered. Cultivating, again, as you said, to be kind, to be generous. But something which also doesn't take time is to cultivate trying to be more aware, trying to be present. Really, it's hard because we are habituated to being distracted, but to try to be as undistracted as possible, even just to say, well, 5 minutes, I'm going to be undistracted, and try. 2 minutes throughout the day. When you think about it, just do it. When I first started, the yogis at our monastery said, make a commitment that every hour you will 3 times every hour spend just a few moments looking at the mind, just looking, seeing how the mind is. What is the mind doing in this moment? And that way it builds up a habit of becoming more and more present, more and more conscious. And, we can do that. It doesn't take time. All it takes is a bit of determination to keep going at it. And to realize that if the thing which causes most problem in our life is our untamed mind, and wouldn't it be lovely to have a tamed mind instead of a monkey mind? Really, that would solve so many problems in our life if only we could just deal with our mind skillfully. So that, none of these things take long, but they do take a certain amount of commitment. It's true. But, then you can think how much better you will feel and how much better other people will feel being around you if we have cultivated at least something in this lifetime, so that at the time of death, we can die knowing we made use of this lifetime and that we didn't waste it. So we can die with no regrets, feeling, yes, I did something worthwhile. I took care of my family, I took care of my life, I took care of myself, but I also lived in order to benefit others. To think ahead, because we're all going to die. Let's die in a way which we can die without feeling, oh dear, now I missed it all again. I wasted my life. So, we just have to keep reminding ourselves what is really important in this life. And what's really important in this life is that we should have made some progress in understanding the mind and in opening up and cultivating the heart. Otherwise, what's it all for? But don't make it complicated. Keep it very, very simple. I think Tibetan Buddhism, they had nothing else to do there, they had no electricity, they had no, televisions, movies, radio, telephones, mobiles, they had nothing. So they had to do something with their lives. So they created this incredibly complicated system, which worked out very well when you had nothing else to do. But it's very difficult for people whose minds are already full of so much stuff. And, you know, what we need is to clear out, not to add more and more and more complications. So just be present. Just breathe in, breathe out, be present, be knowing. That's very helpful for the mind, even in the middle of a business meeting, just to be present.
Yes. Jetsunma, this is the last question from the center, and then we have a little bit of audience questions as well. But you mentioned that your life-changing moment, the most remarkable moment of your life, was meeting your guru, your root guru. There are many of us who've read many books, who've attended many retreats, but we still don't have this one figure which we'll call our guru. So we have respect for all of us, so we love all of them, but we've not felt this moment like you felt. We've not had that connection. Yes, we are impressed with everyone, many of us, but we don't have a guru, so to speak, maybe. Or we are confused about what is a guru, how to find a guru. How important do you think is to have a guru in your life if you're serious about dharma?
It's a difficult question because sometimes also people have very unrealistic expectations of what it would be to have a guru. I mean, nowadays there are very, very few lamas, or at least lamas who are well known and speak English or Hindi or whatever, who are on a one-to-one personal relationship with their students. I mean, the more popular gurus have hundreds, if not thousands of students. And so they are not in a position where they can know each one very personally and give each one very personal guidance, because they just cannot do it. There's too many things. And now also the lamas are going all around the world to all their various centers and so forth in Asia and in the West. And they're extremely busy. Many of them have projects and they're very involved with that. And so the possibility of having a very one-on-one connection with the guru is limited. It's not, you know, people have the idea of just sitting there with the guru and the guru will do everything for them and so forth, but it's not going to happen. So it's a complicated question. I mean, one thing is that nowadays there is so much more available than there ever was back in you know, the ancient days in India and in Tibet. I mean, nowadays the lamas are Zooming and all on YouTube and so forth. And many people do private retreats guided by, like, say, someone like Alan Wallace, who does podcasts of his retreats, which he gives. And so people in their own home follow that and do a retreat in that way. And so many, many lamas now are, you know, out there on the social media, and you can learn an awful lot that way. Plus the fact that people can read books. I mean, in Tibet, except you were really highly, highly educated, you couldn't read. I mean, you could read the book, but you couldn't understand the meaning. It had to be explained to you word by word. That is not true for now in you know, the rest of the world, where people are educated, certainly to the point where they can pick up a Dharma book, and unless it's maybe Madhyamaka, they can actually sit and read it and benefit from it. And there's a lot of books out there now, not only traditional, but also which are written in a more applicable manner that people can really gain a lot from them. And a lot of instruction is out there. So, you know, on that level, we are much more fortunate than former times as far as the availability of the Dharma. But of course, as with anything, any skill, if you want to really master that skill, you need the instruction of someone who themselves are a master. If you want to learn to play a musical instrument, it's much easier if you have a teacher. Because not only, the point with having a teacher is that not only they tell you what to do, but they can also tell you what not to do. I mean, they can see our faults and guide us in this way. Don't do it that way. You should do it this way. Or if doubts come, they can help to explain. So, of course, naturally, an actual person is a whole lot better than just listening to a teacher on YouTube. If one has the karma to meet someone that one really has a devotion towards, then of course that is very good, providing that person is worthy of your devotion. But that is something, I mean, you can meet the greatest lamas in all the world, the greatest masters of any tradition in all the world. And you think, wow, they're really fantastic, but you don't have a connection. Or you could meet someone who is much more simple and unknown and you know, not claiming anything and not sitting up on a high throne wearing a hat. And you do feel a connection. So, you know, we don't need to go to the highest in order to get personal guidance. Sometimes people on a much simpler level are much more helpful for us. We can't tell. But as I say, it's karma, you know. I mean, it might be that we had teachers in the past, but now they're not here, you know. I mean, they might be, I know, in Tibet or in some inaccessible place. They might not have gotten reborn. They might be 2 years old. You know, I mean, the possibility that we're going to meet with someone to whom we had a very close connection in the past life and they are available is, you know, it's possible, but it's not always likely. So I would say, don't worry. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I don't think we can make it happen. And I think that in the meantime, there are many, many great lamas and many great teachers of all traditions, not just Buddhists. And, you know, what we can learn from them, we can learn from them. And the important thing is to practice. Even we have a little bit of teaching, if we go away and really apply it, then that will transform us much more than getting endless teachings. And it all sticks in our head and we never comes down into our heart. That's one of the problems, that we know too much and we don't apply it. So I would say, don't worry. If you're going to meant to have a guru, you will get one. And if you don't wait until the guru comes, because if we think the guru is going to come and click his fingers and it's all going to happen, it's not. So in the meantime, we can learn, we can practice, we can tame the mind, we can train the mind. That we can all do. We don't need to have, you know, to learn ABC and to learn just how to read. You don't need a PhD professor. You know, just a very, very simple level. We can, you know, someone can instruct us or we can learn ourselves. And if we meet with the great professor, then he doesn't have to start with ABC because we've already done our groundwork. We're already there. And then if we meet a great lama, maybe just a click of the fingers will help us because we're ready. Do you understand?
Yes. Jetsunma, thank you so much for that answer personally. Jetsunma, I have 3 questions from people. I have 3 questions. Number 1 question is from the audience. I am 27 years old and I feel a sense of emergency, like we have to seriously act towards a better world. Otherwise, we might not survive and a lot of people will suffer. What advice can you give to the youth?
I think that a lot of the future of this planet depends on young people, because the older people have really messed up and it's hard for them to change their ways. But young people, they can do it. But I think that they need to really see clearly what needs to be done and I mean, now that there's internet, so they can, you know, they can communicate with each other, not to become paranoid, not to become unrealistic, but looking at the mistakes which we have made up to now, how not to do that in the future and how to really how to really work out how to have compassion for this poor planet, which is really crying out in pain right now. Not to make those mistakes, go a different direction. These are young people, you're the ones who are going to carry it forward. So interconnect with other young people, ones who have good ideas and not just, unrealistic fantasies of what we're never going to be able to manage, but some really practical, good ideas on how to go forward from here in a way which will help to heal instead of harm. You can do it. I mean, the young people are the ones who have to do it, because my generation and the slightly earlier generations, they are already too corrupted. They don't know. Of course, there are some very wise elders out there who have been into the whole ecological movement for many, 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 many generations now. You can learn from them too, because they have seen what's going to be happening, and it's happened. So learn from wherever you can, but come together, and think up some viable ways to go forward now. The world is in your hands. If you don't do it, nobody's going to. The world is finished, I think. So fantastic that young people are saying, hey, look, we've got to do something about it. So get together and really think about what you can do, practically speaking, right now, how you can, begin to bring about healing in this planet. So good, great. Keep thinking about it and interconnect with others who are likewise thinking about it, and then do something.
Jetsunma, the second audience question is, this person says, I'm struggling, rather my mind is struggling with food addictions at times of moments of stress when I feel overwhelmed or not capable in the face of hardship and animosity. How to deal with this with more grace and control? How to not go for the object of desire, food in this instance, which it feels it will never go away. In other words, how to deal with addictions and will it ever go away?
The good thing about impermanence is that things do change. I mean, Buddhism usually presents impermanence as a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing too, because if everything always stayed the same, then there would be no hope. But because things do change and we can change, then there is infinite hope. So don't worry, dear, don't worry. The first thing is to accept the fact that you have this problem, this food addiction problem, and then to read about how to overcome food addictions. I'm sure there's lots of things written about it now because it's such a common thing. But also what you can do is to, if you feel that need to go and start eating, to stop and just look at the mind and look at the breath. And even if after that you go and you eat, try to eat mindfully. Try to eat with awareness. Try to be conscious of what you're doing. Slow it down. And as I say, don't just, eat, but eat with awareness. Be conscious of what you're doing for your body also, with compassion toward your body and compassion towards yourself. I think it's very important that people learn to develop loving kindness and compassion, as the Buddha recommended, first towards themselves. Because if we don't have compassion and kindness and affection, friendliness towards ourselves, then we will not only not have loving kindness and compassion towards others, but also we will damage ourselves. And we will not have a good relationship with ourselves. And since we cannot get rid of ourselves, we might as well be friends. So learn how to practice loving kindness and compassion. Start it with yourself. As the Buddha recommended, this is not just some kind of new age thing. This is 2,500 years ago. The Buddha said, start by making friends with yourself, okay? Slow down, be more mindful, and as I say, explore what has already come out on how to deal skillfully with food addictions. So in this way, no, you can change. Of course you can change. Anybody can change. If as the Buddha said, if you could not change, I would not ask you to change. But since you can change, I say, change. And this is how it is. You know, if we couldn't change, there would be no point in even thinking about a spiritual path. But because we can transform, then why not do it? So be practical, learn to be more mindful, cultivate loving kindness and compassion to yourself, and explore the methods which have come up in how to deal skillfully with your particular problem. And then have confidence that, yes, you can do it. Of course you can. Yes, yes.
Jetsunma, the last audience question and the last question of the session, which is coming way too soon, in my opinion, is when to know when one is ready for a solo Shamatha retreat in the middle of nowhere and being totally isolated from the world. When would I know when I'm ready for a solo Shamatha retreat?
Oh, I would say, first of all, do a lot of group guided Shamatha retreats so that all the usual problems which come up have been faced and dealt with, and that you feel a certain stability in your practice. You're very clear about how to practice, how to deal with the problems which come up in practice. Then start with a short time, you know, nothing too long, 10 days, a month, and see how you get on. I mean, it's no big deal. You can, if you know how to do the practice, then, being in isolation is, it's great. There's no problem about it. But first you have to know what you're really doing. And also to recognize that although people, when they're doing shamatha or any meditation, imagine that this is going to lead to great bliss and clarity and all sorts of calm and peace and love and all that sort of thing. But often they discover that actually it leads to, as the mind becomes quieter, then enormous upsurges of other kinds of energies, negative energies. Fear is very common. Very powerful fear, anger, lust, not at all calm, cool, and clear. And you have to know how to deal with those things. I sometimes say it's like if you're in imagine an ocean, then normally we are living on the surface of the ocean. The waves go up, the waves go down, and the undercurrents, that's all our thoughts and feelings and emotions. It's all on the surface. In a shamatha retreat, in a calm abiding retreat, the mind quietens down, the waves quieten down, and we go down and down into the depths of the ocean. Now we might meet indeed with friendly dolphins and beautiful golden fish, and that's all very lovely, but then it's also sharks there. And there are many other demons of the, monsters of the depths down there too. You never know what you're going to meet. It's not all friendly dolphins. And so one needs to know how to deal with these upsurges, traumatic memories, maybe that one has forgotten. Now the mind is quieter. It gives the opportunity for all these long suppressed emotions to rise up, and they want to be heard. Don't press them down again. They are wanting to be heard, and we have to accept them and embrace them. And so you need to know how to do that. Otherwise, you could have a hard time. Some people never get that. Some people get a lot of it right away. You never can tell. But the important thing is to take a good book of shamatha with you, so that if these things come up, then you have some guidance. Take a few books which are inspiring. And then if you know what you're doing clearly, because you've done it before in groups with guidance, then that's wonderful. Great. Have a good time.
Jetsunma, thank you so much. We can't believe we've taken I mean, it's been an hour for us and it feels like it's just been 5 minutes. Before we go, Jetsunma, I know we've taken your evening as well, but before we go, could we just have a small dedication and then we can part our ways? Unfortunately, could we have a small dedication from you, Jetsunma, if we can?
Sonam Nia Tanche Zipani Tony Neba Ronamba Zene Chicana Jebala Tuba Isibi Soleto Adova Shore Jamba Power Jita Jamba Kundu Zambo de Andesian de Dida Kunji Soda Lojinge Wadida Tanjiro Tumo Chancho Sancho Rimbo Chema Japana Jeju Jeje Wanyamba Mepa Yongone Kundu Penwa Shu.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much,
Jetsunma. It was the pleasure
Jetsunma.
of our center. It was
Thank
the pleasure.
you.